Welcome everyone to our second modding bootcamp. This one's going to be on modding patterns and workflow. In this workshop, we're going to be getting more into modding itself. Mario is going to show you how to create a mod that mods the game and how to create a mod that mods a mod that mods the game. And generally, we're going to be getting our hands dirty in the world of modding. So with that, I will invite Mario Enríquez, our modding supervisor, to the stage. And take it away.
Hello everyone. So hopefully you are doing good. Today we will continue, like in a sense, like from where we ended up before, but more towards actually creating a project that is going to be modding the game. And you are going to basically see how modding works. You know how it actually things get injected, how and when, and hopefully I also see like with visual examples so that it makes sense at least to those visual learners, because it can actually get quite complicated. So it's better if you understand how things are happening, because you might face certain cases where some mod that you created is misbehaving when it's like merged with 2 or 3 mods or when we update the game. So hopefully you will be able to see like the causes here. And we are also going to go through some gotchas that you need to be careful, when you are modifying configs or when you are modifying scripts. So I will start sharing the screen so that we can start. This one, if you already have the tools installed, you can actually do follow along. So if you are like a mechanic learner, you can do it this way. So we are going to start like making the mod from scratch in a very simple way so that you can follow along if you have. You can either use the stable tools or the experimental tools. It really doesn't matter for this case. So let's open the tools first. And here I'm going to use a new project. Let's call it project 1. And in this case, I will do a quick recap of how things are actually handled, stored in Arma Reforger. So in order to be able to mod the game, the engine has to have a way to identify an asset or a script, animation, configuration on your mod or other mods. And then it also has to be able to figure out how to merge them. So for this case, we have the Envision file system and the resource manager / resource database. And then when it figures out, like the order of how files are going to be merged, if it detects that you are trying to inherit from some file or you're trying to patch a file, after it does that, it's going to go through for example, for config files, it's going to go through the config system and like based on like what you modified, it's going to start like matching attributes, matching containers in these configurations, and then patching them or adding stuff to them, extending, etc. The other one is the scripting language, which is where you will be creating new features or tying systems together, or even doing completely new things with these assets or configuration that you created. So the configuration, it actually has a name, like the base system, and it's not configuration. You need to understand a little bit here that what we mean with data storage and all that for assets, for animation graphs, for behavior trees, etc., is called containers. And configuration files are containers. Animation graphs are containers. Behavior trees are containers. Like everything that these editors use are containers. They are shared. Like the format and all that is shared across the board on all of them. And everything that is a container, it can be patched, it can be inherited, or it can be duplicated. In some cases here in Envision right now, certain editors actually show you this dynamic, and you can modify it between the editor itself. But in other ones, the support is not there yet, but you can do it manually and it will still work. So I want to show first a little bit like one container. So let's go, for example, some configuration from the game, like the entity catalog. We can see here like multiple files. The ones that you see here that is just like a gray page is a config file. It ends with .conf. I will change the view so that you can read here. And if you open this, you will see this property list. And these are like the containers that are set in this configuration file. And then you can see that you can start configuring things. You can, in this case, this is for Arsenal. You can see things that are defined so that you can start using in the Arsenal. And here you see it all nice, that you can modify it visually. But internally, the format is actually human readable to some extent. And you can see here, that you have the entries for everything, and it's just defined in this here. You don't really need to touch it this way, but I'm going to be showing you this representation of the config files because it's going to help you to make sense of the merging process. So right now, let's, for example, open World Editor. I want to make it in this mod, in this project. I want to make it so that I mod the entity catalog for the Arsenal so that I can add like new weapons and modify an existing entry in the Arsenal catalog. So just so that you know what I mean, let's play the game and let's spawn an Arsenal box. So let's go to systems and then we can select, in this case, let's select weapons. And then let's open Arsenal and then you can see the list here, which is being read from one of these. In this case, is the Arsenal weapons for the US faction. So we will need to find the correct one here. In this case, we want inventory items, entity catalog, US. So this is the configuration for the Arsenal. And for example, you can see here that if I open here weapons, and then I go to the entities, we can see, for example, the M9 is this M9. And then we can see the M60 carbine. And then we can see it here as well. So it's reading from this. So if we want to, for example, modify it for our arsenals, this list, let's say that I want to swap this with a AK, then we have multiple options. One is that we can create a completely new config from scratch, which is not ideal and is not recommended because whenever we update the structure or whatever, you are going to have to completely update everything and redo it. So this is not that viable. But if you go this way, then you will need to go to scripts and also modify the part that is getting linked to read to this configuration file. So the logic of reading this configuration file is done through scripts, and you will have to go to that part and make it point now to the new file that you created. The easiest way, the way that it will be the safest and safest for other modders as well, if they are trying to add things to the catalog, is to actually patch the file. So whenever we have any configuration file and you go to the resource browser, if you right click on it, you can see here in add-ons that you have overwrite, duplicate, and inherit. In this case, we want to modify the same file so that we don't have to point everything else to the new file. So we want basically take this file, add something, and then save the file. We want same behavior as if we were the original authors of the file. So let's click in overwrite. And then you will see here, let's close this game. Then when you do this, you are going to be able to see like new variants of whatever you created. Sometimes the editor might bug out and not update here the files. So if that happens, just wait a little bit and it will refresh to the list, and then you will be able to see the override that you created. So now you can see here in this case that we have two files of the same name present in the editor. And one is here in my project directory, and the other one is in Arma Reforger. So if we were to search, for example, inventory items entity catalog _US, we can see here that it's showing both projects. It's showing the Arma Reforger project, which is a force dependency, and it's also loading our project. And then if I click in project 1, you will see that it's showing here the configuration file that we just created with the override. But you can also see another one here, like the US one, which is the original. If I were to open this one, it's going to open the original. But if I were to open this other one, it's going to open the modification. And one way that you can see it here is with the text view. It will be more clear. I have not modified anything, so right now it's empty. If I open the other one, you will see that it has all the contents, it's the original one. So whenever you have a file that is marked as override of another container /config /animation graph, etc., what the Fusion engine is going to do is that it's going to first detect the original file, then go and detect the overrides, and for whatever override that it detects, is going to take whatever you define here, try to match it with existing content here, and use a swapped like the attributes or properties that they found were the same, and it's going to patch the overrides on top of the original one, and then the game is going to use this patch one or this merge one. So that's the way that this one works. For example, if I were to change the view again to normal, and remember I have selected the override here, one way that you can know if you are currently viewing the override version is that you can go here to the right and you will see resource variants, and then you can see the original variant, which is the original file, and then you can see the variant / override of like in this case project 1. So let's say that I wanted to make it so that this weapon is an AK. I can click in these 3 dots, so that I can see the browser for prefabs. Let's swap it with the AK. In this case, it will be in rifles. Let's do this one, and this one says okay. So now I have changed it, and if I save it, you will see now here in the text view that it has made the changes here. And something that you can look here is that here is the script class or the entity class, etc., or config class in this case, for the entry where I modify the thing, which is this one. And then you can see, for example, in the entities one, is referring to this entities array. And what is saved there is not what you're seeing here in the text here, is what's being defined in the scripts for it. In this case, it's called m_a entities. So that's why you see it there in this view. It's referring to that. And then here you have the class for the container that you are changing, and you see some value here, some weird string, you could say. That string is actually referring to some of these values here is how it is detecting it. So this string that you see here for every element in this array is the identifier of the entry. So it's not basing it on like the index, it's basing it on a specific ID that it created for it. You can also see here when you hover it, it tells you the ID. In this case, we modified this one. So when I change here to project, it should show you that one. So that's what this means. So now that we have located the specific container and the specific attribute that we want to modify in this case, we can set it to something, and then the engine is going to patch this data into the original one, and then it's going to merge it and load the merged one. So for example, if, now that I said, if I reload the game and I played it and I spawn the arsenal again, you should be able to see the changes here, which you can see here. So in general, that's how overriding in containers worked. This is the same behavior for every other configuration file. So you can expect the same to everything. Also, like when something is modified here, you will see it in the white text compared to like the gray that you see usually in things here. You can also add a new entry. So let's, for example, copy this one, create a new one. I think it's this one. And then let's paste it. So that is technically a copy of it. And then just change it to, I don't know, let's say, where will be good? Like a rifle. Let's do this one. And then we can save and reload the game. We should have that as a new entry as well. So you can see what's forgot which one we had. Well, you can see this one here, and then you can see like the rest there. The only thing that you cannot do in this, for example, in this configs, is that you cannot remove something that was already there. So that's one limitation. You can add, you can patch. In some cases, you can move things around, but you cannot delete. So you will find a lot in certain cases that usually we provide you something like enabled or should be disabled, etc. That kind of like makes it so that whatever system is reading this avoids reading this if you wanted to disable it in some case. So I will not be able to delete this entry from the config itself. So that's one limitation. You will have to disable it here. And this enable property is not by default on every entry in every configuration. It's not something provided by the engine. So if you're making a configuration file and you are going to have an array that you might want modders to take entries from it in their own patches, then provide them with some boolean here, like in this one, that is going to allow them to just disable the entry itself. So configuration-wise, that's it. Prefabs are also using containers. So for example, if I search for a prefab here, let's open this one, for example. If I go to the text view, you are going to see that it's also the same format, is also a container. If, for example, let's go here to normal editor. If I went to, for example, like an animation graph, if we go here to animation editor, we open the player main. We, for example, go to, I don't know, movements, animation graph. This complex set of nodes and this graph, internally, it is also represented by the same container system. So if we go here, like this is coming from this animation graph file, which is this one, so that we can say open in resource browser. Let's see. Showing Express, sorry. And this is locomotion AGF. So if we search here, locomotion, we can see it here. If we open it here, you will see it in the visual form, and you will see that it's following the same structure. So everything where you set data, where you configure data in one way or another in Infusion Engine is going to be done through containers. So that means that basically any file that is using this container system, you can have this behavior where you can override things or add new things, etc. So that's how it works for assets. The only other difference that we have modding related is with scripts. And that works a little bit different. Like a script, you will not be able to right click on it and find, for example, like overwrite in project or inherit in project. When it comes to the script files themselves, you are only going to be able to duplicate. And that's because the scripting system works way different for like the modded behavior and such. It's not working through containers, so it's not following that part. So if we wanted, for example, let's say that I want to make it so that whenever the game mode starts, it spawns a vehicle. First, you will need to find here in scripts an event or some place in scripts where you can hijack and inject your logic to spawn the vehicle. In this case, we can go, for example, with the game mode class. So if we search here for game mode, we can see here that we have multiple things. We have on game start, we have on player audit, success, etc. You can think of these as entry points, places where you can get your logic to start processing something. In this case, we want to spawn something as soon as the word is completely processed and all that, when it's safe to start spawning things. Some method that we can use here. It could be, for example, we can see easier here. We can use this one. So let's say, I want to override this method. I want to inject my logic here. How do I do it? Do I modify this file? No, I cannot modify it because it's coming from the add-on of the base project of the game. And that's not in my project. I cannot modify it. I cannot merge it. So the way that you will have to do it is that first you need to identify where the file is. In this case, this file is in, we check here, is in this folder that is being called here, game. This folder itself is technically not a folder by itself. It's referring in this case here to the script module. And the way that scripts works is that scripts are separated in different modules. And modules depend on each other. And in Arma Reforger, we have the core module, which has all the entities, all the classes that come from engine itself. So it's all the basic classes. And then you have another module, which is called GameLib, which has generic behavior, generic classes, generic APIs for game in general, but coming from the engine. And then you have the game module, which has specific classes, specific behavior, specific APIs that are specifically for the implementation of Arma Reforger. And then you have, for example, the Workbench game, which is things that are specific to the game version of Workbench, so that basically what you see here. Like when you are modifying this something in the word editor, or when you are, for example, using the animation editor and you're seeing this viewport here, that's considered the Workbench game. The game here is essentially related to when you play the game, even though it also runs here. So that's a slight distinction there. And then you have Workbench, which usually is used for common Workbench things. And here you can find some scripts for tools and such, So it's basically the plugins that you see here, or plugins for managing things in the resource browser, etc. The limitation with modding here is that you can only mod classes that come from the same module. So if you created your script file in the game module, for example, then you are only going to be able to modify classes on that file that are also in the game module. You will not be able to modify other classes that are in GameLib or engine/core or Workbench. You will be able to use classes and use data, etc., that come from other modules, but these modules are going to be following a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is that core gets compiled first, then GameLib gets compiled second, and GameLib is also going to be able to access everything from core. Then game is going to be compiled third, but it's also going to be able to access everything from GameLib and core. And then Workbench game, and then Workbench. So if you need to do, let's say, modify a file that is from GameLib, then you need to locate yourself in GameLib and add your script there and then modify there. But just keep in mind that if you are in GameLib, you will not be able to access anything that is defined in game, for example. So that's something that you need to be careful with scripts. So now we can see here that, okay, like in base game mode, we have this method that we want to override. And this is in game. No, this is in, let's see. Yeah, game. But there is another limitation here, which is that this class is coming from game code, so that you cannot modify it. It will tell you that whenever you try to modify it, that you cannot modify engine classes. So you are blocked to modify script classes. In the case of Arma Reforger, you can differentiate in general script classes because easily, because they are usually have this tag, which is SCR, which it refers to script, or you can see scripted on them instead. So in this case, we want to modify this one. So, okay, we want to modify this one, so you will need to see what it is. You can just hover here and you can see that it's in scripts/game. And this game folder is what's used for the game module. So that means that we need to basically create a file on our project on this directory. So let's search for game mode here. .c. Base game mode. Okay. And then you can see it here, and then if you right click on it, you will see duplicate. You need to be careful here. When you click duplicate here, it will create a new file on your project, that has the exact same path and same file name as the one that you just selected here. And when you do that, in the case of scripts, what's going to happen is that the engine is not going to treat it as an actual new file and duplicate file of this. So you are not going to end up with two files as far as the engine is aware. You are going to end up with a single file, and the file that you created, that you loaded, is going to completely overwrite and replace the one that comes from, in this case, the vanilla game. And you will see that, for example, if I just created here with the same name, everything, you will see here that, okay, no, you just changed it and all that. And you will see that it copied everything. Like, for example, if I open it here, you can see it's exactly a full copy of the previous one. And we don't want that. We want to create a new one so that we can modify the class. So in these cases, what you want to do is basically make sure that either you have it in a complete unique path, or you have it with a different name. In this case, for simplicity, let's just rename it and call it like the same, just underscore modded. And then you will see it's not finding here anymore. But if I do this, you can see it. If I open it, you can see that now we have the two files. We have the original one here that's the same as the other one that we have here. And now you are going to see that it's going to tell you that you have multiple declarations on things. And that's because we are redeclaring everything that was declared here before. So let's remove everything. Let's have it empty. And then let's start with actually modding the class. So in order to mod a class in M4 script, you have to use the modded keyword. And the modded keywords, it works for modding classes and also modding enums. In this case, we want to mod the class so that we can hijack this event that we saw before and add some logic to it. So I know that this class here, I want to modify it. So I need to get the name of the class and then write modded class and then the class name. And then what's going to happen here is that this is going to behave exactly the same as if you were inheriting from the class, but whatever you add is going to end up in the same class that you are inheriting from. So you can think of this as if you were doing basically this. So in a sense, you are inheriting from yourself in this case. So that means that you can use normal inheritance as well. You will be able to access protected members of like what was defined here. Also private ones. In this case, you can access private ones because for modding, the idea is that it should behave like if you were modifying the original class. So like if you were actually touching this class here in this original file. So in this case, it makes sense to also allow you to be able to access private members. But in normal inheritance, so let's say that I have this SCR-based game mode new. In this case, I will be creating a new class that inherits from this one. In this one, in normal inheritance, I will not be able to access private members of this class. But in modded, you can. Because it's the expectation that you are basically working on the same class or whatever you define there, you can access. So in this case, we wanted to modify this method. So you can just write it or copy it. We'll just copy it and then we can override then the method signature. And then in this case, if we leave it like this, you will actually be getting rid of whatever other classes that are inheriting from this class are adding to this method. So you will be getting rid of the previous behavior. So something that you need to be careful is that unless you know what you're doing and you want it to be that way, always call the previous implementation of the method so that you don't get rid of it. And you can do it with super dot on word process, etc. The same method. And now here, we can now call whatever we want. In this case, let's say that we want to make it so that what would be good? We could make it so that it spawns a vehicle right here whenever you play it. So, okay, let's make it that way then. So let's select first prefab to spawn. In this case, it will be any random vehicle. So let's go to vehicles in prefab folder, and then let's go build, and let's spawn this BTR. So I want to spawn this from scripts, whenever the game mode actually initializes. So when you want to spawn something, resources, whatever, you are going to have to do it through the resource name. So in this case, you can copy the resource name quickly here. And let's put it in a comment here so that we have it here. So this is going to be the resource name that we are going to use to tell the engine to spawn this from this method. So in order to spawn something, the way that you do it is that you get the game, and then you have a method there that is a spawn entity prefab. So if we were to the game class, we can search here spawn entity prefab. You can see this is in the game class, and the game class has in its API, it has this method that you can call in order to be able to spawn a prefab from scripts. It will ask you for the resource. In this case, it's going to be the resource for the BTR prefab, and the word to spawn it on, and the entity params, which is the parameters of how you want to spawn the entity. If you want it to be added to a parent, or the position, if you want to change the scale, etc. So let's use that here. So let's get the game. You can do it with this global method, and then do spawn. Now we'll just copy this. Okay. And then let's fill in things. Okay, something that you need to know about this resource is that the resource is basically a handle to a resource, and they are shared across whenever you're loading resources. So this resource itself is not what we posted here. We need to get the resource object. You can see here in the class itself that you have this static method that allows you to get the resource object from a resource name. And remember that this is the resource name. So let's load it that way then. So let's do resource and then load. And then let's give this resource name. And resource name is basically a string, as you can see here. So that means that in this case, we can just quickly refer to it like this. So just feed it as a string to it. And then let's provide the world. In this case, it's already providing it to us here. So let's do world. And then we need the entity spawn params and such, which is what we can see here that it's asking for. And if we see the structure, we can see that we have the transformation mode, which you can see here as well, what it means. We want to make it so that we spawn it on the world. So we want the transform mode, to be world in this case. And we only want to change the position, so we will only be setting the position value here. In this case, if you want to know what the transform is, the you are going to have the access in the first 3 vectors for the basis, and then the last one is going to be the position. And we want to change the last one, so we are going to be changing that one. So let's create the entity spawn params here so that we can feed it to the method. So let's do a spawn params and then new entity spawn params. And then let's change the transformation mode. And I want this to be the word one. And I also want to select a position. In this case, let's say that the spawn is exactly here. So let's get the position of this prefab, which we can check quickly here. Let's just copy it. Let's paste it here. So I want to is 4 elements so 4 vectors in this transform. And I want to access the last one, so I'm going to access it with the index 3, which is the last one, because it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, so the 3 1 is the 4th one. And I will give it the specific position here. When you see something in a string like this, it's expecting a vector, it automatically converts it to vector. So this is basically the same as doing it like this. It's basically the same thing. You can use whatever you please. It's going to be the same. So now that I have set the spawn params, let's set it here. So we can see now if we didn't break anything, okay, compiles. Let's validate and reload the scripts. So it's going to compile the scripts and then reload it so that we can see the changes. And let's say if it worked, so let's play it. So we can see nothing got called. So if you are trying to check something and it doesn't get called, something that you can do is set a breakpoint and say if something is like breaking it, something is broken, whatever. Then also something that you need to check is if this is actually incorrect path. Like sometimes you might create a script that is outside of the scripts folder and is not also been detected by the modules because it's not in the correct module. So that's something else that you can check. So now you can try to see, okay, it's want to be working, like it's not working, like why is it not working, etc. Something you need to be careful as well is that you need to make sure that you are modifying the correct method. So in this case, you will see that this doesn't work because this is actually not being called from the C++ from the game mode in this case that we wanted. So if you search here, for example, on word post process and all that, you will see multiple methods. Not all of them are going to do what you want. So you need to actually be aware of like what the methods do and when is the correct one. In this case, SCR based game mode is the incorrect one for what we want. We want the one in game. And this is the one that is going to work. So use, like whenever you are trying to test something and it's not being called, always check if it's the correct method. So we can go here to game and then see the derived classes. In this case, the actual one that is being created for creating the game is Arma Reforger script test. So this is the one that we would like to modify. So if we swap it here, then it is going to work now. But now you can see that this script class is different from what I have in the file. You can have any script file, any contents, any classes defined there. The script class doesn't have to be matching to anything on the script file name. It's not like, for example, Java that it forces you to have this. So you can define the classes in anywhere as long as it's inside of the module. So if we try to compile this, okay, we see it works, the same method is there, and then just validate and recompile. And let's play it. So here you can see now, okay, it's not working. Why is it not working? Okay, first you need to check if the class is being loaded correctly. Arma Reforger is scripted. You can search it here. You can see the two classes. You can see the event is being called here. And then something you can do, because sometimes like the method might not be running in the correct time, but you want to see if it's even running, but it's on like whenever it gets created. You can do a print, then add something to check here, let's say multiple A's. Clean the log here, then validate and reload scripts. And then you can try to search, if it's even been printed or not. And let's close all these other things that are open here. So now you can try to play. You can go here and then see if it got printed. And if it didn't, then just check, okay, maybe something got bugged out or whatever. So in those cases, just close the game, close the workbench, and then relaunch it. And then open the project again. And then see if everything is here correctly. Right now you can see that, okay, in scripts we have normal scripts file here. And then we have like the game module. So this one, it should be loading it properly and all that. And so another way that you can also check if it's even loading the thing is you can break the compilation. And if it tells you, yeah, you cannot be loaded, it's missing something, then okay, it's loading it correctly. So now validate and reload. And let's hook into another method from here. Let's go to online. And let's, for example, go on, for example, let's do, what would be good, like on update. You can copy this. Do the override. And I always remember to call super, unless you want to get completely rid of the previous behavior. And feed it the parameters that you are being fed here. And in this case, let's print like hello world. And then compile and reload scripts. And then let's open the world editor. Let's open nptest in this case. And let's play. And you'll see multiple things, like the thing that we show, it actually shows now. And we are printing the hello world. But it didn't before. Let's remove this and reload everything and validate. It's not calling the things again, but it's still showing this. So this is a really big thing that you need to be checking, that sometimes when you are modifying certain methods, and these methods are like in the init, initialization methods and such of things that come from engine or game code, sometimes they don't update properly whenever you are trying to do validate and reload and all that. So you will see that sometimes things doesn't work, but it does work. It's just that whenever you reload it from here, especially when it's a method that has an event on it, things might not update when you are reloading the scripts. So you will need to completely reload Workbench. So whenever you find yourself in that, just be sure to do that. If everything else was correctly, like it was in the correct folder, it was in the correct module, it was modifying the correct method. So now you can see, okay, in the on the world post process, we have modified these methods from scripts. That is from the game, which happens when everything got initialized properly, and then you're safe to do things. So whenever we start the game, now this is going to be spawned. Sometimes you might not want this to be spawned, for example, here in the editor. You want it to only be spawned in the game. So something that you can do is that you can do if, then get the world, and then in the world you're going to have a method here that is called is edit mode, and that will tell you if you are like in edit mode in Workbench, for example. In this case, we want to not do anything in the method, so we can just return at this point. And if we validate and reload, you will see now that you don't have this prefab here. And something that you will notice when you spawn a prefab like this is that you cannot select this in the editor because it's not an entity source. It's not something that comes from here. So you cannot select it. It's external, so it's broken, it's misleading to some extent. So what you will want to do here is that you want to avoid that whenever possible. And that means that it's very important for you to be aware that in certain methods, they get run into the world editor, but they also get run into the game. So you will need to check if you are in the game or into Workbench game, for example, which you can do by checking this. So that's in general like how modded classes and methods work. Something you need to be careful as well when you are modifying a method, doing an override like this, is that if this method was protected before, so let's say that in the original implementation it wasn't just like this. Let's say that it was instead event protected void. If you ignore having protected in the method signature here when you did the override, you are actually modding the signature to now be public. All methods are public by default. So if you ignore the protected, then it's public. If you were to do this, then you actually will be making this method now be private. So that's also something you need to be careful because you can mod the content of the method, but you can also mod the signature. You cannot mod the arguments. It's only the modifiers that you can mod. And the return type, you also not be able to mod this one. So it's only the method modifiers that you can mod. So this is important to know because you might actually make at some point method private or public when you didn't want to, and then you're going to start causing issues. So if you were to do this, this is not a shortcut for just this. You are actually getting rid of the event behavior and the protected behavior of the method. So that's a little bit of a gotcha here with modding methods. Okay, so now like what happens when you have two modded classes on the same one? So let's say that you had this. This is valid. And what will happen is that this one is going to inherit directly from the vanilla one, so this one. And then this one, which gets compiled later, is going to technically inherit from this one. So the super here is referring to the behavior here. So it starts to get chained in this way. So this super is not referring to the vanilla one. So that means that this way you can also mod other mods. You can define like if whatever you made actually happens first before like any other mod or even the vanilla one. You just need to be careful that this is going to call this modded one, which is calling super here. So that means that the original behavior now is going to be called at last before yours. So that might be some unintended behavior there. So always be careful with these things. So one way to show visually, like this is being called after whatever is defined here is to, for example, spawn something based on some entity that was spawned. So let's cache like the vehicle that we created here. So let's do entity last spawn entity. Let's assign it here. Spawn entity prefab will return an entity, the entity that it created, if it created any. So that means that we can assign it to this variable here. So now this variable is technically part of Arma Reforger scripted. So that means that I can actually access it here now in this other modded class. And this modded class, it can be in any other project. It really doesn't matter if it's in the same file or in another file or if it's in another project. The only thing that will matter is that the compilation order might change. So whenever it gets injected, a how is going to be different depending on when it was compiled. And the compilation order here is not affected by the dependency list on the projects. So that means that the mod load order is not going to affect the compilation order here because the way that the script compiler compiles everything is that it's going to order all the files based on their file paths and the file names in ascending order from ASCII. So if you want something to be run at last, then the only way that you can achieve it is go to the ASCII table, then select like some directory that is going to be run at last, so like something started with set or something like that. So there is no way to set dependency for the compilation order of scripts. So that's something you need to be aware whenever you are defining something because you need to be a little bit defensive in the way that you are programming if you want to allow for modability without being broken by other mods. So we will see one example here. So let's say that we want to spawn something in this one, and then we want to use what we spawned here and get the position of like the spawn entity and offset it by 10 meters and then spawn the new one. So the way to do it here is that, okay, where should I set the offset? Okay, I should do it here. So I'm expecting in this case that last spawn entity has the entity that was spawned here. So I can reference it and then do get origin, which is going to give me the position. And then let's use offset by 10 meters on the x-axis. So if I run this and validate and reload scripts, then whenever I apply, I should have 2 BTRs now. And you see again, okay, it didn't load. Why it didn't load? Okay, you can set the breakpoint if you want. Let's validate and reload again. Set the breakpoint here, and see what gets called. So let's play. Okay, it called this one already. Let's see the call stack. It called this one first, and then because it's the super, it went to this one. It went here, and now I can do this, and now it went here. So we can see here with the way that it's being called, that how it's working. So this one got compiled at last. So that means that this one is the one that is going to define the final order, and in this case it's telling it, okay, first call all the previous implementation and then call my stuff. So if I were to play it, then we can see it here. So we can see that this spawn both. And the offset was based on like the first one that spawned, which was this. But now what happens if the compilation order makes it so that this other model class is actually compiled first before the other one that was creating this behavior and that added this variable? No, that means that whenever the game is going to compile this script, it's going to try to compile this first. It's going to throw an error because as far as this compilation step is concerned, last spawn entity doesn't exist. So it will throw a compile error. And you can see here. So this is one problem that you can have. If suddenly you change, like some folder or some file name of whatever you had here, and you were depending on another file that define those things. If that another file is in like a previous position in the compilation order, then you are going to run into issues of things not being declared, something is missing, or just misbehavior in general. So always be careful of that. Sometimes you will not run into these errors, so the debugging will actually be a little bit of a pain. But if you are aware of this, then you can start checking. So that's in general with modded classes. You can add any kind of new member, like you can add a new variable, you can override a method, you can add a new method, like for example test method, and then this method, for example, is not going to be accessible here as well, or in any inherited class from Arma Reforger scripted. So it's going to behave exactly like normal inheritance. So like with modded in general, that's it. For enums, let's say that I have this enum, test enum. If I wanted to mod an enum, it's going to be the same as classes. So that means that technically they also being the same. And the only thing that I need to do is add modded before the definition. And then whatever I add here, modded constant, for example. Then whenever I add here, when the engine compiles this and this together, now as far as the script VM is concerned, the enum is going to be basically that. So it merges it into the same one here. Exactly same behavior as what we saw with the configs. So for scripts in general, okay, that's what we can go with. Some way to see visually as well, like kind of like how we did here in scripts with the configs or prefabs, etc. in this case, is that we can actually see visually here with prefabs. So let's go for example, with the US here, like for this one, for example, Let's create a subscene so that we can add stuff to it. So I will just save this here just for the sake of showing stuff. Let's spawn this one and let's go to the base one. So let's say that I have this prefab and I want to create variants from it and to create a duplicate and all that. So let's go through all the options that we saw here, when we were checking with the configuration files, and we saw here that we have override in, duplicate to, inherit in. Let's see it visually here with this prefab. So let's locate the prefab and let's also locate it in the resource browser here. So let's create actually inherited versions of this prefab. So let's make the blue version of it. So let's call it, I don't know, vehicle blue. So we clicked on inheritance, so that means that it's going to be inheriting from the original one that we selected, and whatever change we make there is going to also take effect here. And then whatever changes we made on this new one is also going to take effect there. And right now this one is the original one, so let's just drop the new one that is showing here now in here. And then you can see here that is showing now in the inheritance hierarchy. It's showing like the new one that we created, which is vehicle blue. But if we select this one is the original one, we can see that it doesn't show it. So if we went here to the blue one, we went to make it so that now this is blue, then in this case we have to go to the mesh component and go to materials while we are selected to vehicle blue, and let's change this material that we can see here. Let's change it to like its blue counterpart. This one. So here we can see that it has blue, so we have selected vehicle blue. Let's modify this attribute, and you can just drag and drop it here to quickly set it. Now we can see that this one got changed. And if we save it, now we have saved it in the prefab. Then we can also check here, if we go to the vehicle blue and we open it here, we go to text view, we can see that it modified this one. And it is inheriting from the original one from here. So that means now that we have the original one, we have one that is inheriting from this one, so it's kind of like a variation in a sense. And if we were to also create, let's say, a red version, we will need to go to this prefab again, find it, and then do another inheritance. And let's do now this time vehicle, and let's do orange, and then click OK, and now we have the new one created here that is in our project. Then let's drag it here. Let's go to vehicle orange, mesh component again, and let's go to where these are, and now let's find the orange one, which I think is this one. Now drag it, and then we save it, and then now we can see, okay, we have these variations. So now let's also check again the duplicate option. If I click here and then click duplicate, it's also going to create a like similar option here, but it's going to be a snapshot of the original one. So it's going to copy all the attributes, everything that the original one has, and create a new one. So that means that it's not inheriting from the original one. So if I make a change to the original one, then it doesn't take effect on this duplicate one. And you will be able to see here, because we are going to modify the original one as well. So let's keep it here, and actually let's give this one vehicle duplicate. Let's give this one the red one. So I have the original one here. I cannot modify it because it's locked. So if I want to modify it, I will need to go again to the prefab, find it here, or find it like in the resource browser here, and then click overwrite in my project. And now it's going to create another prefab, but this one is going to actually be overwriting like the patching merging that we talked about before, kind of similar to modded class, but in this case modded prefab or config, etc. So in this case, if I drag it, it's essentially going to be the same as this. You can see here that it's showing project 1, and here is project 1, because it's treating it the same. So if I were to, for example, select like the one on my project here, and then, for example, I don't know what would be good, go to the slots, and let's attach an arsenal to it, for example. So we can go, for example, here in prefab editable, and then search for arsenal. And let's attach the American one. So let's do US. And let's attach this one. So if we wanted to attach this one to this vehicle and see how it gets affected by everything else, then we can create in the prefab that we have in our project here, which is the override, we can create a new slot and then see like how it gets affected and such. So let's go here and slot. Actually, let me save it. There you go. Okay. Oh yeah. If sometimes you don't see like the things here, it's not because it's locked. It's because it just went outside of the view. So just make sure to resize it. So let's go to the slots here, and then add a new one, not an entity, on the prefab. Add a new one. In this case, I don't really care too much about the special behavior, so let's do the most generic slot, which is this one. Let's give it name as Arsenal. And then you can see here added, and let's make it so that this gets attached to the vehicle. Okay, you can just drag it here as well, and it will do the quick action here. And now let's offset it so that, let's say that we want it to be on the back. It doesn't make sense, but just as showing it. So you can see here how this one that is the one that we created the override and we dragged is changing the original, and it's changing the ones that inherit from the original. But it didn't change the duplicate, because the duplicate is not based on the current version of the original. It's based on a snapshot of the time when you did the duplicate action on. So if I were to save this, for example, and play, you will see some craziness here because we didn't save the physics. So you will see them like bugging out. So also make sure, in this case, to disable physics interaction of the attachment date on the entity. And then if you save, you can see. Okay. The red one is the duplicate. It doesn't have the arsenal attached on the back, but this one does have it because this is the override. And this was the original that we spawned. And then the inherited ones from the original, now they also have the arsenal because we patched the original one with the override. So that's with config classes, like every container and all that, how it works in terms of like inheritance, override, and duplication. And if you have multiple mods, for example, we save this one. So let's close Workbench. Yes, let's save. And let's open it again. And create a new project, which is going to be called Project 2. That has the first project as dependency. Now Workbench is going to open both projects at the same time. And we are going to be able to mod stuff or work with stuff of Project 1, but also of Arma Reforger. So now let's say that, let's go to the world that we created here in Project 1. And let's say that now we want to take this one, or actually like take the override of Project 1 or whatever, and add something to it, but from Project 2. So what you can do is that you can select here the one for Project 1 and override that one specifically, or the original one. So let's go to the original one. And when you try to go to the original one from here, with this quick action, you will see that it points you directly to the one in Project 1. And that's because now, as far as the resource browser is concerned, it's the same. So let's do override in Project 2 so that we can add something from Project 2 on top of the changes of Project 1. So now that we have the override here, we can select here Project 2 and add something in the slots. For example, let's go to slots and let's make it so that, I don't know, let's take out one wheel. So now we can see that all of them change. And let's save it. But the one that was duplicated at the end. So now this is an example of mod that is overriding my vanilla to make it so that this wheel is not showing anymore. While there is also another mod that is modifying the vanilla version that is making it so that this arsenal is attached to the back. So now you have the merge of both of them, but you are referring to the same prefab as a single one, even though it's basically 3, but they are being merged as 1 because you selected them as overrides. So those are the key aspects of modding in general for Infusion. Everything else is just like basically the same things from each other. And this is, for example, is a visual entity representation of what we saw with the configs. So with the config files, exactly the same thing. And for scripts, for example, now that we are here in Project 2, we can still see the one for Project 1 because it's loaded there. We can, if we wanted to add another class from this on Project 2, we can either do the duplication thing or just do it manually. In this case, let's create the scripts folder. And it was in the game folder for the game script module, so that we can just create it here. And then the class can be anywhere. In this case, let's do P2 modded. And now we can open this file and create another modded class for the same class here. And let's say now that we also want to get the last found entity, which is not being set in the other one. Like here we are setting it. Let's set it on the other one so that it starts to get chained. Now this one is going to spawn another one 10 meters away from the other 10 meters offset one. So if we validate and recompile and then run this, we should be able to see 3 of them now. So you can see 3, 1, 2, and 3. So that's where the merging of like modded files in scripts happen. Regarding making actual features and such, with, for example, EndScript and all that, there will be another one at some point that is going to be basically creating a new game mode from scratch. And this one will be touching replication, it will be touching sending and showing stuff in UI. So this one will be more hands-on, like working on an actual feature and touching multiple things, connecting them. This one is mostly so that at least the idea of modability in Fusion Engine gets across. And the difference is in between like the container modding / config modding versus script modding, because there is the merging difference behavior like based on the overrides and such. Okay then, that will be it, and we will see each other in the next one.